All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is a momentous day for the state of Connecticut. We have an excellent bill crafted with collaboration and centering on equity and communities of color in our state as we produced a system of legalization that is just and equitable. There is a certain irony in the fact that the state Senate passed the final version of this bill 50 years to the day when President Nixon declared a war on drugs and really a war on people of color in our country. So this bill will address those terrible tragedies and inequities and create a national benchmark of equity in legalization going forward, crafted to repair the wounds left by the war on drugs in communities of color in Connecticut. Other states legalized marijuana before Connecticut, but we are leading the way in legalization with a laser focus on equity. This bill in this session is testament to Governor Lamont's leadership. Together, we have taken on some very big challenges and done big things in our land of steady habits, whether it's sports betting, paid family leave, $15 an hour minimum wage, and now equity-grounded legalization of recreational cannabis. Our administration has tackled some generational challenges in our state. So I want to thank the governor for his leadership, and we're going to hear from him in a minute. But we couldn't have done this work without the leadership and without collaboration with our incredible legislative partners. And it's my honor to first introduce the President of the State Senate, Marty Looney.
Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor. This was indeed a session of great achievement, not only the cannabis bill, which had been pending for years and which we in the Senate felt like it was Groundhog Day, doing the bill over and over and over, but in addition to that, the gaming bill had also been pending for a long time. Reform and change to the bottle bill had also been pending and discussed for a long time. We created a new, more equitable system for the payment in lieu of taxes system by having a three-tiered system taking need into account, did away with the welfare liens that would reach back and injure people in trying to sell their property later in life. There were a number of significant initiatives that will make life better for the people of the state of Connecticut. And certainly the cannabis bill, I think it was important that we had the benefit of having looked at the experience in other states. And our focus was not just on creating a revenue stream, but on addressing equity issues, on looking at the communities who had been most harmed by the aggressive enforcement of the marijuana laws over the last 50 years or more, and the injustices that had occurred, and the number of people who had their lives permanently blighted by minor marijuana charges and convictions. So our bill was more complex, more nuanced, and I think it will be a model for other states that will look to adopt it going forward. So it's great to be here with the governor today, who provided steadfast leadership on that, and with the lieutenant governor and my colleagues in the General Assembly. It's a proud moment for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Looney, and I'm going to invite up Speaker Ritter and Majority Leader Rojas, who are going to come up together.
Yes, we are. Come on, Jay. Thank you, Governor. I appreciate that, and I'll turn it over to the Majority Leader in a second. I want to thank everybody who's with me, the Senate President. Sorry you had to vote 3 times, but you certainly knew the bill. You knew the bill well by that point. No one can deny that. Chairman D'Agostino, who you'll hear from, the co-chairs of the Judiciary Committee, Representative Stastrom, Senator Winfield, and obviously the governor and lieutenant governor, and all the staff that was involved in the negotiation of this bill. You know, as Marty alluded to, in many ways, this will go down, in my opinion, as an historic session. Marty mentioned some of the things that happened. I look at the Judiciary Committee behind us. How many bills have we talked about for 3 or 4 years that came to fruition? I could talk about clean slate, prison gerrymandering, and the criminal justice reforms that were done. Marty mentioned the aid to municipalities for the first time in rethinking pilot. This is none of those bills in isolation makes it a historic session, but all those things coupled together, I really think people will look back and say a lot happened. But it's a good reminder to everybody in this building that timing matters too. Every time I meet a young person who's 21 years old who thinks they're going to be president of the United States, I remind them that politics is often a little bit of luck and timing. And the combination of those two things and hard work can lead to good results. Well, elections have consequences, and elections lead to results, but it takes the right combination of factors. A governor who is supportive, a Senate that can work with the House, co-chairs that work well together. You couple that with the laser-like focus that a handful of legislators put with staff on this bill, and you get a really good combination. So from the House, I thank the chairs who worked on it earlier, but I really want to give a special thanks to our Majority Leader, who spent an inordinate amount of time putting this bill together, weeks and weeks, and it's that combination of factors that makes great legislation happen. Anybody in this building can propose a bill. It's easy. You get a piece of paper and you say, this is the bill I want. The true talented legislators are the ones who pass bills, and that's why I'm proud to work with Jason Rojas on this. Mr. Majority Leader?
Thank you. Now, I certainly appreciate the kind words of the Speaker, but, you know, a bill of this magnitude, a bill of this complexity, it's bigger than any one legislator, it's bigger than any one caucus or any one branch of government, and we would not have gotten there without the work of both Senate and House leaders, without the governor's office, without the incredible staff, and they're standing over here to my left, who deserve an enormous amount of credit for making us look good as elected officials. You know, the level of expertise that was needed to get this bill to where it is right now was really critically necessary. Not only the staff who work for both the legislative branch and the executive branch, but certainly a lot of the advocates out there who were busy informing us about the process, who understood what happened in other states perhaps better than any of us could have as elected officials. So this is just a really great effort. And now we turn to implementation, but we also turn to communicating to the public about what's in this bill. And I think the other partners in this are all the people who are sitting in front of me here. Members of the media who are out there already explaining what the bill is, what it does, what it doesn't do. So there's a lot more work for us to be done. We're going to be working on it for years, but at least in the short term, let's work together to inform the public about what this bill is, what the goals of it were, and what the really good product that came out of this legislative session in getting this bill passed. I think it'll be the most comprehensive and best cannabis legalization bill in the country. History will tell us if that's true or not, but I feel confident in saying this right now. This is the best bill in the country, and it's going to move us in a direction of ensuring that we provide a well-regulated marketplace for adult-use cannabis, for adults who want to participate in that kind of activity. So, again, I just want to thank for everybody who was involved in that, and a really proud moment for me as a legislator to work with my colleagues on getting this bill to the governor's desk, ready for his signature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Majority Leader. It's now my privilege to introduce Representative Steve Staffstrom, who is the co-chair of the Judiciary Committee. Representative.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to certainly all of my legislative colleagues and certainly to the governor and the lieutenant governor for their leadership on this. You know, Connecticut is a state that rightly over the last decade has really prided itself on being at the forefront of criminal justice reform issues. Being the 19th or 20th state to legalize recreational cannabis was, in my mind, a blight spot on that record that we have of taking a leading role on criminal justice reform and recognizing that this is a drug that is less addictive and less harmful to the body than several others which we regulate, including tobacco and alcohol. Recognizing the need to finally erase old cannabis convictions, I think, was something that was long overdue on this state. And so I'm proud as we sit here and we talk about a historical session, certainly in a number of respects, and not the least of which was on criminal justice reform issues, that at the top of that list is finally getting legalization done and finally making sure we join that group of states that recognizes this is a drug that can be and should be safely regulated, and I think that's what we've accomplished in this bill. And certainly I want to particularly thank my co-chair and partner in crime reform, Senator Winfield, for all of his efforts as well on this. So.
Thank you.
That's legal training right there, folks.
Thank you so much. You know, before I introduce this next leader, There are two characteristics that come to mind. One is perseverance and one is tenacity, and I think I know a little bit about both of those two things, and I see both of those two things in Senator Gary Winfield. Senator.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. It's interesting. I almost didn't make it today, but then I said to myself, you did that bill 3 times. You should be at that bill signing. It did get shorter every time. Listen, I want to thank the governor for making this an issue of his during the session, my leadership, the leadership in the House, my co-chair, Representative Rojas, who together we helped to kind of shepherd the legislators who were working on this bill. I want to thank those legislators, Senator McCrory, Representative Juan Candelaria, and Representative Robin Porter. And at the heart of what this was for us was not just we're going to legalize this drug and go out and make some money from it. I hear what people are saying, but that wasn't what this was about for us. This was about the war on drugs that the Lieutenant Governor talked about that started many years ago. And we could talk about 50 years ago, but we can go back even further than that. And the things that have happened under the war on drugs are that we have targeted certain communities. The things that have happened under the war on drugs is that we've existed under a legal scheme where we have laws that are just, not just. And I think what the state of Connecticut did by focusing on that, along with all of the other things that come from legalizing cannabis, is to deal with the issues of the past. The Judiciary Committee this year did have, along with the whole body, an amazing year. Now the problem I have is people are asking, what are you going to do next year? But we'll come up, we will come up with something, we always do. But what makes it really amazing is not the number of bills we passed or the fact that this was first or second or 19th. What makes it amazing is that incorporated into what we did was thinking about not only where we're going, but where we've been, and making sure that we deal with the things that impact communities because of where we've been. So I want to thank everybody for being here today and supporting us and watching us do this bill over and over again. I think it is one of the most important things we did this session, but what's most important is that we didn't just talk about equity, but that we built it in. Thank you.
So there were two committees that really focused on this legislation. One was the Judiciary Committee, but the other was the General Law Committee. So it's my pleasure to introduce Representative Mike D'Agostino, who leads that committee.
I don't have much to add than what my colleagues have said. Just keep in mind two things as maybe you're right about this. Until this year, every other state that did this did it via referendum. They put it out to vote. I have no doubt if we had done that in Connecticut, if we could have done that in Connecticut, it would have passed 2 years ago. But we've got a legislative process here that we went through. In many respects, that was a good thing because we were able to develop this bill over years and then finalize it in the last few months. The other thing to keep in mind is that we've got the benefit of a 10-year-old nation-leading medical marijuana program in Connecticut. And we've built this program on the back of that, on the back of those regulations. So we've had that experience as well. Those two things, those two pieces of this puzzle, as the majority leader said, make this the best piece of cannabis legalization legislation in the country. I want to thank our legislative leaders for the support throughout the years in passing this legislation, and thank the governor and lieutenant governor for their support as well. Thank you.
So it often takes quite a while to make good things happen. The governor and I talked about this issue a lot during our campaign when we ran in 2018, and it's a proud moment that I get to introduce Governor Lamont to talk about this important legislation and then for us to sign it. So, Governor, it took us 4 years, but no more of it. Here it is.
Hey, first of all, let me just say, the last 100 times I was in this room, I would generally be sitting there by myself. Mac was over there, a couple of guys from CTN, and one big camera. So it's kind of nice to see you. Secondly, you've been working on this for a long time. Susan and I were talking about this, and as Matt said, you have to work hard to get the yes. There's 100 different roads that make it easy to vote no, and there's one road that gets to yes. And Matt and Marty, you got us to yes, and it makes a big difference. Everybody's thanking people. I can tell you that Mohit and Patrick and Jonathan put in many, many hours to get this done. And Gary, 3 times the charm, man. 3 times the charm. It was a really important thing to do. It's an important thing to do on a number of fronts. Number one, in terms of equity and social justice, I love the fact that this is an equity fund. It's going to give folks who otherwise sometimes don't have access to capital, the capital they need to start up their own business, focused on the most distressed communities, those communities that were hardest hit by the war on drugs, making up for some lost time there. All of us here in public office place a premium upon public health, more so than ever after this last year, and public safety. I think this is a bill that prioritizes that, make sure that we can do this in a safely regulated way. I think it is a model for the rest of the nation. We've had a chance to learn from others, and I think we've got it right here in the state of Connecticut. Maybe we weren't the first, but we're the first, I think, to show that we can get it right and what that means for people going forward. So it's been a long time coming. As you heard, a lot of bills have been pending around here for some time. We got a lot of them passed this year. I thank each and every one of you. We all had to make some compromises along the way, but that's what good government's all about. I think the state is better off for the work you guys did over the last this legislative session. Let's sign the bill.
Yeah, let's sign it. All right, so we're going to invite all of our leaders back up, and we want to thank all of our media partners for coming today, and the governor and all of our great leaders will take questions once they finish getting their photos taken. All right. All right. Any questions from the media? Has.
There's a tight time frame in here to get things up and running. People in this room, including the ones leaving, have certain appointments to make. So can you give us an update of what are your goals for when to have the Social Equity Council up and running, as well as having DCP spell out a structure for how to run this new business?
Well, we have all of the legislative leaders in the room, with the exception of Mr. Speaker, but I'm sure they're going to make the appointments quite quickly, right? And if there's anyone who would like to speak to that?
Sure, just briefly, yes, we're looking at the legislation, and we're already starting to look at options in terms of appointments. So I think that's a high priority for us.
In 45 days, I think, is a timetable to have that. Is that realistic?
It is if you start working, right? I've already begun the conversation in my office about how we're going to identify the most qualified people to serve on the Equity Council. So once we get that going, we're certainly, I know I'm focused on it. I'm sure everybody who has appointments is focused on ensuring that we get that Equity Council appointed.
Are you guys going to try to make similar processes for how you're going to sort of pick these people, or are you individually going to pick sort of a process that you think to sort of evaluate the candidates that you feel like?
Yeah, I'll let folks speak for themselves.
Jason, can I ask you a question? Only one Republican, right, voted for this legislation, and just moments ago, the Connecticut Medical Society released a statement saying that they feel that this is bad policy and is dangerous. What do you say about that?
Listen, we appreciate their concerns. I think as lawmakers, we all recognize that there is a public health aspect to passing something like this. But we have the days and months and years ahead to address those concerns, and I'm more than happy to work with the Medical Society to address whatever concerns that they have.
Do you think it'll be important to revisit this legislation on a regular basis to see what's working and what's not, and to make sure that those who are negatively affected by it get the help that they need?
Yeah, it's not unlike many pieces of legislation that we pass here. We revisit things on a year-to-year basis as needed, and I'm sure something as monumental and complex as this will require us to do the same.
I think it was asked how other people were about to go about appointing people to the Social Equity Council.
Sounds like there's not maybe going to be a unified process against all.
Well, I think we, as the majority leader said, I'm sure we will both have people reaching out to us, seeking appointment, and we'll also be soliciting people who we think might contribute a great deal. So I'm sure there'll be no shortage of interested people looking to serve.
Will these parties require any kind of confirmation, or is it just you guys pick them and go to work?
I think so. I'm not sure whether they would be required to go through the Executive and Legislative Nominations Committee. I don't believe so. No.
As written, the bill doesn't require that they go through the exec noms or any of the other processes we have. They're just appointments directly from whoever has the appointing authority. We do that oftentimes when we create boards or commissions. It's not abnormal, and it was just the way that we chose to do it this time.
You mentioned earlier that this is not just about revenue, but it is about equity, which has been a big push for you and its supporters. But there's no question that this is a lot of money to be made here. How do you keep that element? How do you keep that in check? That people are going to partner with minorities or people in neighborhoods, and that you can't control that.
Well, I think we put some thought into that. That's why we have a 65% percentage that you have to be of the business. That's why you can't immediately turn the business over. It's why we defined the social equity applicant in the way that we did. Nothing's perfect. We know that. But I think when you put some thought to what this actually is, and take a look at what's happened in other places where the kinds of things that you're talking about have happened, and also that social equity applicants have had access but not really been able to participate, you get a better system. We'll see as this happens, takes place, what's actually going to happen. But I think that putting that thought in place before we pass the bill is likely to yield better results.
With municipalities able to have their own ordinances and banning retail pot shops, is there any sense of how many communities might be amenable to the retail cannabis industry?
I don't think there's any real way. That's a question perhaps for CCM and cost to answer, but certainly there are some communities who are going to prohibit the establishment of any kind of cannabis-related industries in their communities, and that is their right, or they need to be accountable to the voters who live in their communities about whether people who live in that community would prefer to have that or not. So then, of course, there is the opportunity to, or the lost opportunity of some additional revenue for towns and cities, as they are always seeking to diversify their revenue streams. Obviously, having an establishment will avail you of that opportunity to get that 3% of revenue.
I was speaking also today with some of the medicinal dispensaries. They have a concern that this could be putting the cart before the horse because they already are having trouble actually getting the product. They say the growers can't keep up fast enough with the demand that's out there. So what are we going to do to make sure that the growing develops before the sale happens?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken with a number of the current operators, and it's a mixed messaging. Some of them, I didn't hear that concern expressed to me when I've been meeting with those folks over the course of the session. Most of them seem to indicate that they wouldn't be concerned about being able to keep up with supply.
That's a bit of an old chestnut. We've frankly been hearing that in the General Law Committee from dispensaries for the last few years, and we've investigated it and found no truth to the assertion that there's a supply problem in the medical industry now. But mindful of that, keep in mind that the way that this law works is before any single dispensary opens to sell recreational cannabis, DCP has to go through and check the supply for medical first, and not a single sale on recreational will happen until we as a legislature and the regulatory body at DCP is assured that there's enough supply for medical. Medical was first and foremost in our minds, among other things, obviously, when we were doing this bill.
I just have one more question along those lines. The cap of 30% THC level, some of the medicinal dispensaries said their medicinal product is between 30 and 35%. They think 30% for retail is too high. Do any of you have concerns about that THC level?
Keep in mind that 30% is for the flower only. There's a 60% limit for the pieces of it, the concentrate, and then there's other limits as well. When you look at the supply chain throughout the nation, actually, most products never even hit that level. So we were not concerned that that's too high. And again, there's other levels in here for the medical. So we did not have a concern about the levels being set too high at all.
In this industry, do you really think production is going to be a problem in this state? I mean, I would think people would want to get into this industry and start making money. So
yeah, my guess is that there will be.
You know, I come from a town that's called the wedding plant capital of Connecticut. All you need is a couple of greenhouses and you can get going.
Right, and I mean, I think most people's mindset right now is on the current 4 cultivators, but obviously the law does allow for micro cultivators as well. So we're hoping to see a cottage industry of cultivation in this, with both small and large cultivators playing a role.
Another question I have. I mean, when you can go up to 300% of the median income in the state, and I believe in the debate you guys mentioned it was 80, maybe up to
about $240,000.
$240,000. Is that letting the small micro business entrepreneur into this industry, or is that setting the bar too high?
No, I mean, it's going to, getting into this industry is going to require significant capital resources, and we wanted to ensure that we could actually get a marketplace stood up, and that's why we went with a kind of higher threshold for who could get into the business as an equity applicant. We're forgetting that half the licenses go to equity, the other half will go to the rest of the world, and that will open up, obviously, the marketplace to lots of individuals who have the capital to get into this line of business.
Going back to municipalities, now one thing that happened in Massachusetts, one issue has been that certain municipalities have been, or at times were asking for exorbitant things from, has there been, they found the exploitative and things like that. Has any thought been given to that happening in Connecticut and safeguard things like that?
That was largely a product because Massachusetts required community benefit agreements, and certain chief elected officials looked to use that as leverage in negotiating with prospective business owners. We didn't require that in this law. We actually barred them, right?
A little bit about municipalities, over 50,000 residents who would have to choose a public space for someone to actually smoke this. Is that accurate? Can you talk about that?
Yes, there's a provision in the bill that if you're a municipality over 50,000, you have to have a dedicated public area for the consumption of cannabis, regardless of whether or not you've banned retail shops, etc. So you have to have that if you're a municipality over 50,000. There were a number of considerations that went into that. There's a social equity component to that. Keep in mind, consumption can mean smoking or vaping. We'll see how the municipalities deal with that. But the idea is you didn't want to turn, say, the New Haven Green into just a smoking free-for-all, right? So you'll have a dedicated area for public consumption. We also are concerned about, with municipalities of that size, you have some larger housing, areas, right? And so you don't want, again, congregations outside smoking in this area or that area. You have a dedicated space in the municipality, in larger municipalities only, where you can consume cannabis. And again, whether that means smoking or vaping may be up to the municipality. So you have to have that if you're over 50,000. The other thing that's related to that, just keep in mind, is no municipality, even though they can ban retail sales, ban growing, do whatever they want in that regard, they cannot ban delivery. If there's a licensed delivery, a licensed product going to a consumer in that town, you can't ban that.
How do you envision these designated areas? Can you highlight, I mean, what do you think those are going to be for any municipality over 50,000?
I left that up to the imagination of our locally elected officials.
What's the degree that they can regulate, though, the public use? Mike referenced the New Haven Green, so can New Haven ban
This is all in our Clean Air Act that was amended in the statute. A municipality can ban the public walking down the street, they can do anything that they want, and if you're under 50,000, you can ban it completely. Smoking in public, retail sales, everything. The only niche to that, like I said, is if you're over 50,000, you have to have that public consumption area, and that's it. You can ban everything else.
I have a question for you regarding Philip Morris International. They did I guess their CFO or CEO or Chief Economic Officer, somebody did an interview with Bloomberg in March or April and indicated that they might be looking to get into the cannabis market. Do you know of any plans of PMI to do that here in Connecticut? Is that something that attracted them here?
No, absolutely not. They told me they have absolutely no plans to get into the regulated marijuana market.
Governor, you were quite effusive in welcoming PMI to Connecticut this morning. Was there any reluctance on your part or any misgivings about welcoming a company that is associated with what is still an addictive product, nicotine, and is associated with many, many deaths?
I think I was proud that PMI looked all over the country and all over the world and decided Connecticut is a place they wanted to make their corporate home. Particularly proud of the fact that they're going to take the lead in getting people who are addicted to cigarette smoking off of cigarettes. And they have an alternative called IQOS, which is much safer and has FDA authorization. I think they're headed in the right direction. We're going to be a better state, better country for their efforts.
And what would you describe your role in bringing them here? You referenced this morning conversations that started prior to the pandemic with, I guess, their previous CEO. So can you just give us a little flavor of how that went and what your role was?
We found we had some friends in common. And that's a good way to start a relationship that's based upon trust. And PMI came quietly to the state, as well as other states, back before the pandemic, say 18 months ago. We got together informally, had a dinner at my house with a number of business leaders who do business in the state of Connecticut. And, we can all be here as advocates and say Connecticut's a good place to do business, but having folks who do business, talking to other business people, I think made a big difference.
Of how the cannabis market, legal regulated cannabis market in Connecticut is going to unfold? What sort of profits do you expect to see from this industry? Contributions to state costs?
Well, first of all, remember, it's a regulated market. Everybody's saying the THC content and where can I do it, where can I? The alternative is an unregulated market, a black market, an underground market where none of these things are controlled and they're much more dangerous. I think that is a driving force behind what we're trying to do.
How far do you expect to see this industry take off in Connecticut?
All I can do is look at what has happened in other states. Some states have a 10-year head start on us, and I think it will be a growing industry. And there was questions about supply and demand, and Marty winked and said maybe we're going to get back to some of our agricultural roots when it comes to supply.
I have a question about COVID. We're seeing numbers showing that young people are less likely to get vaccinated, and I'm just wondering, is that something that concerns you, and what can the state do to change that?
Well, first of all, obviously, ages 1 through 12 can't get vaccinated. There's nothing approved for them as yet. We just got off the phone with the COVID task force in Washington saying, what does that mean for, summer learning camps and the such for that group that can't be vaccinated, indoors, outdoors. We're thinking about that in terms of the fall as well. Governors have to come up with some protocols on this pretty soon. But more importantly, for those who are eligible to get vaccinated, we've got a variety of different incentives. Look, first of all, let's face it. Connecticut, our young people, as well as our old people, are more likely to be vaccinated just about any state in the country. And that's made a big difference in terms of our infection rate, which is now, well less than 1%. And we're going to continue to do the best we can in terms of that younger population to make sure they get vaccinated. We'll be announcing some incentives probably in a couple of days. And it involves front row seats at some concerts people might like to get to.
Yeah, it's that 18 to 39 age group that is the toughest nut to crack, so we'll be laser focused on trying to get them to get vaccinated.
On the cannabis bill, there was apparently some restrictions in there on where you could smoke cigarettes. I didn't really hear that debated much during the many debates. Where did that idea come from? If someone could sort of articulate the thinking behind those.
Again, as I mentioned earlier with the question, there's multiple statutes that needed to be amended for cannabis. One of those is Connecticut's Clean Air Act. And so as part of the changes to the Clean Air Act, you have to include in that cannabis. And when we're making those changes, it made sense to just update the Clean Air Act entirely. So there were additional changes that we tweaked, really hand in glove with the cannabis changes as well. We would have done these things anyway because, frankly, our Clean Air Act is a little dated. It didn't reflect vaping, whether that's nicotine vaping products or cannabis vaping products. So that was a change that was going to happen whether or not we did cannabis.
Governor, in your conversations with PMI, did you broach whether or not they intend to offer flavors in their vaping products that they're looking at?
Well, they don't do any vaping products,
Well,
right?
They call it something different, but it certainly sounds like it.
Heated tobacco, not burning tobacco. They're going to have menthol and tobacco, no flavored products, period. Nothing oriented towards young people. Very strict about that.
All right. You had a point of discussion about that.
We did.
Thank you.
Speaking of young people, there's been a lot of concerns about this legalization sending the wrong message to young people. There are provisions in the bill that regulate advertising so it's not sort of targeted. There's no Joe Camel kind of characters. How do you answer critics who are concerned about the message that this sends to young people?
Well, I think you answered part of it. We're very strict in terms of marketing. Right now, you look around the state and you see these Massachusetts billboards coming up like mushrooms in the jungle, and we're going to be able to regulate that in a very strict way going forward. And I also think, somebody grew up in the 60s and 70s, having a law that people sort of are, let's say, erratic about enforcing, unfair about enforcing. A lot of white kids, it really wasn't enforced. I think a lot of black and brown kids, it was really strictly enforced. I think it created a certain disrespect for the law. I think now we have a law that people can believe in and enforce, and I think that's a good thing. Anybody else want to add to that?
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.